Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. Look at your life right now. The endless routine, the constant struggle, the fleeting moments of joy quickly swallowed by responsibilities and worries. Have you ever stopped in the middle of this cycle and asked yourself, what's the point of all this? If everything ultimately ends in death, if the universe is indifferent to our existence, why do we keep pushing forward? Most people avoid this question. They distract themselves with entertainment, money, status, anything to avoid confronting the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, life has no inherent meaning. But what if I told you that facing this reality head-on could be the key to your happiness? What if meaninglessness isn't a curse, but freedom? One man had the courage to stare into the abyss and came back with a shocking answer. An answer that could transform how you experience every moment of your life. For thousands of years, humans relied on religion to make sense of existence. Every struggle had purpose. Every tear had meaning. Every moment of suffering was part of a divine plan. Death wasn't the end, but a doorway to something greater. People found comfort in this certainty. They looked at the vastness of the universe and saw purpose written into the stars. But then something changed. Science began offering different explanations. Darwin showed that life wasn't crafted by divine hands, but shaped through evolution. Physicists revealed a universe governed by impersonal laws, not moral principles. Disease, natural disasters, suffering. These weren't tests or punishments. They were random, chaotic, meaningless. As scientific explanations grew stronger, the old stories began to fade. Religion's grip loosened, and humanity lost something profound: certainty. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it coming when he famously declared, "God is dead." This wasn't a celebration, it was a warning. He wasn't saying a divine being had literally perished, but that the foundation of Western morality and meaning was collapsing. Without religion, what answers remain to life's biggest questions? Why are we here? What happens after death? What gives our struggles meaning? The universe offered only silence, cold, indifferent, and absolute. This wasn't just an intellectual crisis, it was deeply personal. If there's no higher purpose, why get up in the morning? Why chase dreams? Why fall in love? Why do anything if it all dissolves into nothing? The response to this crisis shaped much of modern philosophy. Some embraced nihilism, concluding that without God, nothing matters. Others desperately clung to outdated beliefs, preferring comforting lies to uncomfortable truths. Many simply numbed themselves with distraction, chasing money, status, pleasure, anything to avoid facing the void. But one philosopher refused to look away. Albert Camus stood at the edge of this existential crisis and not only stared into the abyss, but found something unexpected: a way forward, a way to not just exist in a meaningless world, but to find profound joy in it. Camus identified what he called the absurd, this fundamental conflict between our human need for meaning and a universe that refuses to provide it. It's like screaming questions into an empty canyon, desperately waiting for answers that will never come. Most people try to escape this reality. They either deny it through blind faith in religious or political ideologies, fall into nihilistic despair believing nothing matters, or distract themselves with endless entertainment and consumption. Look around. How many people do you see scrolling endlessly on their phones, partying without joy, chasing wealth but never feeling satisfied? They're not truly living. They're running from the void. But Camus refused to run. He chose a fourth option that would become the foundation of absurdism. Embrace the absurd. Accept that life has no inherent meaning, and in doing so, find freedom to create your own. Camus found his answer in an ancient Greek myth, the story of Sisyphus, a king who angered the gods and received the ultimate punishment. For eternity, he would push a massive boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down each time he neared the top, forcing him to start again. Forever, no rest, no reward, no escape. Most see this as the perfect metaphor for life's futility. We struggle, we strive, we build, and ultimately everything returns to dust. Generations before us worked and built, only for their achievements to fade with time. If life is just an endless cycle leading nowhere, what's the point? But Camus saw something different. He ends his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, with a surprising line. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happy? A man condemned to pointless eternal labor. How could anyone find happiness in such meaningless suffering? Here's Camus' revolutionary insight. The moment Sisyphus accepts his fate, when he stops resisting, stops wishing for things to be different, he becomes more powerful than the gods who cursed him. The gods wanted to break him with hopelessness, but what if he simply refused to suffer? What if, as he walked back down to retrieve his boulder, he smiled? Imagine Sisyphus standing at the bottom of the mountain, watching his boulder roll down. Instead of cursing the gods or falling into despair, he just shrugs, takes a deep breath, and starts pushing again. No complaints, no self-pity. No need for a grand reason. This isn't surrender, it's rebellion. We are all Sisyphus. We wake up every morning, go to work, chase ambitions, fall and get up, build relationships, create things, and try to carve out our place in the world. And yes, ultimately, it all resets. Generations from now, nothing we do may be remembered. But does that mean what we do is worthless? Only if we choose to see it that way. Once we accept that life has no grand cosmic meaning, we are free to create our own. Think about it. If life had some ultimate predetermined meaning, we'd be trapped by it. We wouldn't be free, we'd just be following a script. But because there is no fixed meaning, we get to decide what matters to us. Instead of waiting for the universe to hand us a purpose, we realize we don't need one. We stop searching for some ultimate justification and start living for the experience itself. This is what embracing the absurd really means. It's not about pretending life has some deep cosmic purpose. It's not about falling into despair. It's about revolting against the absurd by choosing to live anyway. Not because we expect some grand reward, not because we believe in an afterlife or fate, but simply because we can. Because joy is possible even in a meaningless universe. Because we can choose to love, to create, to laugh, to explore, not for some higher reason, but just because it's worth it in the moment. Instead of seeing life as a curse, we see it as a playground, a space where we're free to explore, to build, to fail, to experience everything fully, without needing external justification. And that's why Sisyphus is happy. He knows his task will never end, but he pushes anyway, not because it will lead somewhere, but because he chooses to. When we stop asking, what's the point, and start saying, why not? That's when we truly become free. That's when life becomes lighter, brighter, more exciting. Because instead of looking for a meaning that doesn't exist, we start creating one for ourselves. Camus didn't just write about absurdism, he lived it. For him, it wasn't just philosophical theory, but a practical approach to life. Born in 1913 in French Algeria, Camus knew suffering intimately. He grew up in extreme poverty, lost his father in World War I when he was less than a year old, and was raised by a partially deaf mother who could barely read. At 17, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, which would plague him throughout his life. He lived through World War II, witnessed the horrors of the Holocaust, and struggled with the moral complexities of the Algerian War. Camus had every reason to fall into despair, but instead, he chose to embrace life with remarkable intensity. He wrote in his journals, "In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer. Despite knowing life had no inherent meaning, Camus threw himself into it completely, writing prolifically, engaging in political activism, loving passionately, and living fully until his tragic death in a car accident at just 46 years old." Camus didn't just talk about finding freedom in absurdity, he demonstrated it. But how do we actually do that? How do we transform philosophical theory into daily practice? How do we find happiness in a meaningless world? First, we need to recognize how absurdism differs from nihilism. Many people confuse the two, but they are completely different responses to the same problem. Nihilism says, life has no meaning, so nothing matters. Absurdism says, life has no inherent meaning, so I'm free to create my own. The nihilist sees meaninglessness as a reason to despair. The absurdist sees it as an opportunity for freedom. The nihilist gives up. The absurdist rebels. The nihilist asks, why bother? The absurdist asks, why not? Consider how this plays out in real life. You lose your job. The nihilist spirals. Nothing matters anyway. Why try again? The absurdist shrugs. So what? The universe doesn't care. I'll find something else. You fail at a project. The nihilist concludes, this proves everything is pointless. The absurdist thinks, interesting experience. What can I learn from this? This isn't about toxic positivity or denying pain. Absurdism doesn't claim suffering isn't real or that we should ignore it. It's about recognizing that suffering doesn't need cosmic significance to be meaningful to us. Our experiences matter because we say they matter, not because the universe confirms it. According to Camus, there are 3 ways to live an absurdist life. 3 practical approaches that can transform how you experience every moment. First, stop overthinking. Most of us waste our lives trapped in endless rumination. What if I fail? What if things don't work out? What if I make the wrong choice? We hesitate, analyze, wait for the right time. But here's the truth. The universe doesn't care. You could sit there worrying about every possible outcome, but none of it matters as much as you think. Lost your job? So what? The world keeps turning. Another opportunity will come. Failed at something? Who cares? The universe isn't keeping score. Made a mistake? Welcome to being human. Move on. Camus teaches us that life is absurd, unpredictable, and chaotic. Instead of wasting energy overthinking, just take action. Because in the end, whether you succeed or fail, the boulder is going to roll back down anyway. So, why stress over it? Second, rebel through joy. Most people think meaninglessness is a reason to despair, but Camus saw it as an opportunity. Since life has no inherent meaning, you're completely free to enjoy it on your own terms. Think about it. When you laugh even though life is meaningless, you're rebelling against the absurd. When you love knowing that everything fades, you're rebelling against the absurd. When you create knowing nothing lasts forever, you're rebelling against the absurd. Every act of joy is a form of defiance. Instead of sitting around feeling lost, rebel by embracing life anyway. Laugh loudly, love deeply, explore without needing a reason. Create art that will eventually be forgotten. Build relationships that will one day end. Do it all not because it serves some greater purpose, but because you can. Third, ask why not instead of why. Most of us hesitate before making big decisions. Should I start that business? Should I take that risk? Should I travel, learn something new, or follow my passion? And our brain always responds with a list of reasons why we shouldn't. It's risky. It might not work. It's not practical. What if I fail? But Camus would tell us to flip the question. Instead of asking, why should I? Ask, why not? Why not start that project? Why not take that risk? Why not live boldly? Because at the end of the day, the boulder's going to roll back down no matter what. So, why not have fun with it? Camus' absurdism isn't about surrendering to meaninglessness. It's about revolting against it by choosing to live, to act, to experience everything without needing some grand purpose. And once you start seeing life through this lens, everything changes. You stop waiting, you stop hesitating, you stop worrying about things that don't matter. And instead, you start living. From the moment we're born, we're told that life has a purpose. Society, religion, culture, everyone gives us answers. This is the right path. This is what you must do. This is what will give your life meaning. And so, we spend our lives searching, looking for meaning in success, in relationships, in beliefs, ideologies, and achievements. But what if the truth is this? There is no meaning, not written in the stars, not waiting to be discovered, not hidden in some ancient text. At first, this might sound terrifying, but Camus saw it differently. If life has no meaning, then you are completely free. Free from expectations, free from pressure, free from the burden of needing a reason to live. And in that freedom, you gain something extraordinary, the power to create your own meaning. Not because the universe gives it to you, not because some higher force demands it, but because you choose it. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Living with the absurd requires courage. It's much easier to cling to comforting illusions or numb ourselves with distractions than to face the void. That's why most people never truly embrace absurdism. They'd rather live with pleasant lies than uncomfortable truths. The pandemic provided a perfect example of this. When normal routines were disrupted, when people were forced to step back from the daily grind, many experienced what psychologists called an existential crisis. Suddenly, without the distractions of commuting, socializing, and consuming, people had to confront fundamental questions about their existence. What am I doing with my life? Does my job matter? What's really important? For many, this was terrifying. They couldn't wait to get back to normal, back to the comforting routines that shielded them from these uncomfortable questions. But others found it liberating. They realized they'd been living on autopilot, following scripts they never chose. The pandemic forced them to confront the absurd, and some emerged with a new perspective, a determination to create meaning on their own terms rather than accepting society's definitions. This is the essence of Camus' message. Life doesn't have to have an inherent purpose to be worth living. In fact, its very meaninglessness is what gives you the freedom to define what matters. Instead of being trapped by predetermined meaning, you're free to create your own. But there's another dimension to absurdism that's often overlooked: its social implications. Camus wasn't just concerned with individual happiness. He also cared deeply about justice, solidarity, and human dignity. If nothing has inherent meaning, doesn't that apply to moral values too? Why should we care about others if nothing ultimately matters? Camus' answer is striking. Precisely because life has no cosmic meaning, human connections and ethical choices become more important, not less. If this life is all we have, if there's no divine judge tallying our actions, then how we treat each other here and now is everything. In his novel, The Plague, Camus presents characters who find meaning in fighting a deadly epidemic together. Not because God demands it, or because history will remember them, but simply because alleviating suffering is worthwhile in itself. As one character says, the only means to fight the plague is common decency. Camus believed that recognizing the absurd should lead not to selfishness, but to solidarity. We're all in this meaningless existence together, all facing the same void, all creating meaning in a world that offers none. This shared condition should unite us rather than divide us. In a world where tribalism, extremism, and rigid ideologies increasingly dominate public discourse, absurdism offers a different path. It encourages humility. If no one has access to cosmic truth, perhaps we should be less certain about imposing our beliefs on others. It promotes empathy. If we're all just trying to create meaning in a meaningless world, perhaps we should be gentler with each other's struggles. And it fosters authenticity. If you're not living to fulfill someone else's script, you can finally become who you truly are. Camus wrote, "Always go too far, because that's where you'll find the truth." In a society that rewards conformity, embracing the absurd allows you to break free from expectations and live according to your own values. Critics of absurdism often argue that without objective meaning, life becomes pointless and morality collapses. But this misunderstands Camus' position. Absurdism doesn't claim nothing matters. It claims nothing inherently matters. The difference is crucial. Things matter because we choose to give them meaning, not because the universe dictates it. This is actually a more demanding moral position than the religious or ideological frameworks that provide ready-made answers. It places the responsibility squarely on your shoulders. You can't outsource your moral choices to ancient texts or political dogmas. You must decide for yourself what constitutes a good life, what values are worth upholding, what actions are worthy of your limited time on this planet. Dostoevsky famously wrote, "If God does not exist, everything is permitted." But Camus would disagree. Even without God, we still have our humanity, our capacity for compassion, our ability to recognize suffering in others. These don't require cosmic validation to be meaningful. Think about it this way. You see someone drowning. Do you need a divine command to help them? Do you need to believe in eternal rewards or punishments? Or is the drowning person suffering enough reason to act? Camus would say the suffering itself is sufficient motivation, regardless of whether the universe cares. So, where does this leave us? How do we apply absurdism to our daily lives? How do we find happiness in a meaningless world? Camus offers a powerful three-part formula: revolt, freedom, and passion. Revolt against the absurd by refusing to surrender to despair. Don't accept the world as it is. Reshape it according to your vision. Create meaning through action, not passive acceptance. When the boulder rolls down, push it up again. Not because you must, but because you choose to. Embrace freedom by recognizing that you're not bound by predetermined meanings or purposes. You're free to define your own path, to create your own values, to live authentically rather than according to others' expectations. Without cosmic meaning constraining you, every possibility opens up. And finally, pursue passion. Experience life intensely in all its beauty and tragedy. Don't hold back, don't dilute your emotions, don't shield yourself from the full force of existence. As Camus wrote, live to the point of tears. Throw yourself completely into whatever gives you joy. Art, love, friendship, nature, physical exertion. Not because it serves some greater purpose, but because the experience itself is enough. This approach to life isn't easy. It demands courage to face meaninglessness without flinching. It requires honesty to abandon comforting illusions. It takes strength to create your own meaning rather than accepting ready-made answers. But the reward is extraordinary: authentic freedom, genuine joy, and a life truly your own. Next time you feel trapped in the monotony of daily existence, wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat, remember Sisyphus. Remember that you have a choice in how you approach your boulder. You can curse the gods and resent your fate, or you can smile as you begin pushing uphill again, finding joy in the journey itself. When you encounter failure or setback, instead of asking, "Why me?" ask, "Why not?" When faced with difficult decisions, replace "What's the point?" with "Let's see what happens." When confronting life's brevity and eventual oblivion, don't despair. Celebrate that you get to experience anything at all. As Camus wrote, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. The void isn't something to fear, it's the canvas on which you paint your life. Meaninglessness isn't a curse, it's the precondition for freedom. The absurd isn't your enemy, it's the doorway to authentic living." One must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because he's delusional about his situation, but because he's chosen to find meaning in meaninglessness, purpose in purposelessness, freedom in constraint, and so can you. The alarm will still ring tomorrow morning, the routine will still demand your attention, the boulder will still be waiting at the bottom of the hill, but how you approach it, that's entirely up to you. If you found this perspective on life and meaning valuable, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into philosophical ideas that can transform your daily experience. Comment below. How do you create meaning in your life? Are you more of a nihilist or an absurdist? Let's have a real conversation about what makes life worth living, even in a universe that offers no answers. Remember, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. Maybe happiness isn't about finding meaning, but creating it in the face of meaninglessness. Maybe that's what makes us truly human.